Hey guys, it's Xerxwidif, and we're coming back strong with what if Yuji was like Aizen. I might just make this the final part, just get it all done with. Sorry for making you guys wait, but yeah, I don't want to keep you guys waiting even longer, so let's just get right into it. After his encounter with Sukuna, Yuji didn't know what he wanted to do. If it was just Sukuna by himself, he could have taken him on. However, with those other two there, he was simply going to bide his time. For now, his entire objective was simply to focus on filling the barriers with cursed energy, as much as he could in fact. He had already noticed in one of the other colonies, there was a huge amount of cursed energy being generated at a rapid pace. He could only wonder what was happening over there. His plan for right now was to simply try to gather as much cursed energy as he can throughout the barriers. So if he could feed his cursed energy into the barrier as well, things would progress a lot smoother from here on out. He would go straight towards the Sakurajima colony, where he would see 3 people already fighting it out. There was one girl without any cursed energy at all, an extremely fast cursed spirit, and some guy that knew how to use blood manipulation. He would think it was Choso at first, but he would quickly dismiss that seeing the man, just coming to an understanding that they may be related somehow. He would notice with them fighting, they were generating a lot of cursed energy, more of the cursed spirit generating it. He had never seen anything like this. The cursed spirit was extremely fast, but it was extremely grotesque, a worm-like looking creature. It had pinned Maki to a wall and was telling her about how much he hated her, telling her that he came back from the dead just to kill her. Noritoshi would attempt to fire off a piercing blood attack, attempting to kill the cursed spirit in one fell swoop. The attack would land, however, it would force the cursed spirit to turn itself into a cursed drone, attempting to evolve. Yuji would simply sit back and watch and let them gather as much cursed energy. His job wasn't to get in the way here, it was simply to watch and let the cursed energy gather. The only reason he came over here is because he was interested in what was making so much cursed energy in the first place. Although he knows that Maki is a part of the Jujutsu sorcerers, if anything were to happen to her, he would simply step in and stop it. Noritoshi, not wanting the cursed spirit to evolve any further, would attempt to use convergence once more, slapping it together to use another piercing blood. He would shoot off the piercing blood as it would pierce directly through the cursed room. Noritoshi would believe that that was the end of that and would be thankful that the curse didn't evolve any further, because if it did, it would have been even faster. However, before Maki or Noritoshi could even think, the cursed spirit had already evolved and was already next to Noritoshi, punching him, sending him flying with a lightning fast punch, sending him crashing through multiple tree lines. The curse would exclaim that Noritoshi was trash and was completely clueless about his place. Yuji would find this interesting. A Jujutsu sorcerer that came back to life as a cursed spirit simply to get revenge on someone he hated. He had heard about Maki destroying the Zenin clan, but he didn't realize the Zenin clan hated her this much, to the point where one of them would come back as a cursed spirit. It was fascinating, and on top of that, he could understand why people like the Zenin clan would hate people like Maki. The Zenin clan was one of the big 3 clans that had took confidence in their cursed energy and their cursed energy techniques. Of course they would hate someone like Maki, someone who had 0 cursed energy at all. 0 cursed energy, 0 cursed technique, yet she held the Zenin name. She had to be an embarrassment to them. However, it would seem that their entitled look on Maki would be why they had their downfall. This would make Yuji fascinated with Maki, someone with 0 cursed energy. He's never even thought about someone like Maki. Even while he was at the school, he never once thought about Maki. She never once took his attention, but now, something was different about her. He would simply continue watching to see what she can do, as cursed spirit Naya would continue to rush down both Maki and Noritoshi. The fight would go on as it does in the original, until eventually Maki's body would be smashed into the ground from a high-speed impact. She would have failed to stop one of Naya's attacks and would be heavily injured. Naya would stand triumphantly over Maki and taunt her, saying that he couldn't believe he ever lost to her. This is when Yuji would finally make his move. He would jump off the building that he was standing atop, landing right next to both Naya and Maki. Both Maki and Naya would look over as they would both see Yuji just standing there, as Yuji would wave his hand, telling Naya that it was a pleasure to meet him, as well as meeting Maki as well. Naya would continue crushing Maki. Naya would continue crushing down on Maki as he would speak out to Yuji, asking him who the hell was he. Yuji would simply tell Naya that he was simply here to help. However, Naya would scoff and tell Yuji that he doesn't need his help at all. Yuji would then laugh, saying that he believes Naya is mistaken. He's not here to help him. Naya would then ask if that was so, as Yuji would just simply say that it sure is. He would pick up Maki and throw her to the side, rushing straight towards Yuji at blinding speeds. Yuji would simply smile, staring at Naya speed at him, as Naya would attempt to run Yuji over completely. However, Yuji would simply step out of the way. However, Yuji would then turn into a glass panel, as Naya would laugh out, coming back around, picking up speed, as he would tell Yuji that he was an idiot for trying to save someone who didn't deserve to be saved. It's a shame that he wanted to save such a worthless person like her, so instead of coming to save her, he's simply going to die instead. Naya would come back around, going as fast as he could, as he would rocket straight towards Yuji, slamming his head into Yuji, blowing a hole straight through his torso. He would begin to laugh once more, saying that he can't believe someone like him came so boldly, only to die so simply. He would then turn around, looking for Maki and asking where she was now. This is when Naya would hear a voice behind him saying that they weren't quite done yet. Naya would turn around, absolutely confused. He was sure he just hit Yuji. He was sure he just killed Yuji. What the hell just happened? Yuji would say that, yeah, he killed him, sure, but killing him simply won't be enough. He's going to have to do a lot better than that. And this would begin to piss Naya off. He didn't know who this guy was or why he decided to jump in the middle of his fight, but he was going to make him pay. This nobody let Maki get away, and now he's going to suffer the consequences for that. He would rush at Yuji once more, picking up speed as he went, as Yuji would be doing nothing but analyzing what his technique was. He kinda got the basis of it when he watched Naya turn one of his copies into a panel. Also, while watching Naya pick up speed, he notices certain things. The cursed spirit takes certain actions, and when he matches those actions, he significantly boosts himself in speed. So Yuji would only think that the same applies to him. However, if Yuji didn't complete the action that was needed from him, he would freeze in frame like his copy did. However, what if he were to beat Naya before he could complete the action? Would it bypass the rules of his own technique? Yuji wasn't sure at all. However, all he did know was that he loved experimenting, especially in the midst of battle. Everything to Yuji was an experiment. Naya would continue rushing straight towards Yuji, as Yuji would have to try to figure out exactly when Naya would complete his actions. He didn't know exactly how the technique worked, he only knew the basic. The only thing Naya had over Yuji was speed. However, in everything else, Yuji completely surpassed him in. Naya would continue rushing straight towards Yuji. As Yuji would try his first time to counter Naya, he would reach out his hand, placing a barrier around himself. However, he would be turned into a frame once more, as Naya would graze himself onto Yuji, spinning himself back around, picking up a lot more speed. He would crash into Yuji once more. However, this time, Yuji would only be blasted back. He would only say the words, "interesting." As Naya would continue to wrap around once more, he wanted to finish this fast so he could get back to Maki. So this next attack, he would pick up as much speed as he could and break right through Yuji. He doesn't know how Yuji got out of it the first time. All he knows is that this time, he was going to kill him. Yuji would then begin to speak out loud, telling Naya that he believes it's funny how he views Maki. Not too long ago, Yuji had no viewpoint on Maki. However, just watching her now, it made him gain insight on certain aspects of cursed energy itself. On other people besides him, he couldn't believe there was someone like Maki to begin with. He heard of someone that was like Maki in the past, however, he didn't actually think it was true. He knew about heavenly restrictions, but Maki's was a completely special case. One that makes it so cursed energy itself does not dwell in the body, however, they still exist in the world. It's quite fascinating. It's a shame someone like Naya looks down on someone like Maki for having no cursed energy. Yuji would then stare up just as Naya would be right in front of him. Yuji would simply step to the side, turning his body, as Naya would blast straight past him. This would confuse Naya. He wasn't expecting Yuji to dodge. especially not him. Yuji would then laugh, saying that he could have ended the fight right there. He would then say that he understands why Maki was able to defeat him in the first place. It was hilarious that how the same person that he looked down on, the one person that he viewed as insignificant, was the one to kill him. And she probably would have done the same thing again had Yuji left them alone. This would begin to piss Naoya off beyond belief. Who was this nobody to talk to him, heir of the Zenin, like that? He couldn't believe his ears. He would begin to scream out that Maki only got lucky. That's the only reason she beat him. Yuji would then laugh and ask, was it really luck? Or are you really just that weak? Naoya would then scream out that he'll show Yuji weak, as Yuji would then have a large smile grow on his face. Naoya would begin to shoot himself directly towards Yuji, picking up speed at a rapid pace, even faster than he was before, as Yuji would then begin counting in his head. Every single moment where Naoya would pick up speed and gain another burst, Yuji would be counting as he would lift his foot up into the air, and as Naoya would appear right in front of Yuji, he would drop his foot down as he would laugh, calling Naoya a complete idiot, as Yuji's foot would connect with Naoya's face, slamming him into the ground. Yuji would laugh, telling Naoya that he was so easy to rage bait. He gets mad too easily, and that's why he loses. He would laugh again, telling Naoya that this is exactly the reason he lost to Maki. He can see why Maki was able to defeat someone like him, because Naoya is simply too weak. Naoya would then scream out, calling Yuji a bastard, as his body would begin to transform, as a humanoid-like torso figure would pop out of the creature. He would scream at Yuji, telling him that if he thinks he's weak, then tell him what he thinks about this. He would make hand signs and begin to say the words, domain expansion, time cell moon palace. Yuji would immediately activate simple domain, casting numerous barriers upon himself, as Naoya would then scream out, calling Yuji a coward. He would tell Yuji that if he's so proud about his strength and Naoya is so weak, why did he need to use simple domain? As Yuji would simply tell Naoya, rolling his eyes. Now why exactly would he simply take a hit from him just because? This is what Yuji means when he says Naoya is an idiot. This would piss off Naoya even more. However, before Naoya even got the chance to say anything more, he would feel a blade pierce his back, going straight through it. As Yuji would simply say, see what he means? As Maki would have stabbed Naoya with the split soul katana, killing Naoya immediately, collapsing the domain, as Yuji would then sigh, saying that was a big risk. He was kinda hoping that she came back and saved him, but there was also the chance that she would just leave. He would tell Maki that he was quivering in his boots. She would look at Yuji and tell him that she's not so stupid to believe that. She knows he could have killed him at any given point, so why did he waste so much time? Yuji would say that he was simply letting him use as much cursed energy as possible, and that he knew eventually Maki would come and finish the job. Maki would ask, who exactly is Yuji? As Yuji would simply say that he's someone that wants to make the world a better place. He would tell Maki that he's already met up with her other classmates. He would tell Maki where they were and say that he was going to be on his way now. The only reason he came here was so that he could gather more cursed energy. That was it, and that was all. He would then proceed to walk away, as Maki would be confused beyond belief. She had heard about Yuji before. However, she didn't know that he was capable of doing stuff like this. The last she heard of him, he died to a special great cursed spirit. And now, all of a sudden, he was back alive and he could have killed Naoya super easily. There was a lot of things she was going to have to catch up on. But for right now, she would simply go regroup with the other Jujutsu sorcerers. Yuji would know to himself that that battle had gathered a lot of cursed energy, and there was only a small bit of cursed energy left that was needed to fill the barriers. Everything was going according to plan. This would cause Yuji to walk around, looking for more cursed users to help him fill the barrier. However, he would then hear a grating voice behind him, telling him that everything has been going according to his plan. Yuji would turn around as he would see Kenjaku. Yuji would laugh and ask Kenjaku if Sukuna sent his dog after him. Kenjaku would only let off a slight chuckle, calling Yuji amusing. However, this is where things would end between him and Yuji. Yuji's done enough in helping him forward his plan. However, However, with the barriers almost filled, Yuji is no longer needed in his plan. And right now, he's nothing but an extra variable that Kenjaku simply needs to take care of. As Yuji would laugh, asking Kenjaku, is he sure someone like him will be able to take on Yuji? Kenjaku would laugh out, saying that he saw the performance between him and Sukuna. He assumed Yuji to be this all-powerful being. That pressure that his curse energy puts out, it's nothing but a scare tactic. He would laugh at Yuji, telling him that he can only hold those down that are weaker than him. Yuji would then laugh again, asking Kenjaku does he not recall him being held down not too long ago. However, Kenjaku would simply tell Yuji that of course he remembers. He remembers playing along with Yuji, telling Yuji that he isn't as strong as he thinks he is. Yuji would ask Kenjaku if that was actually so, and if they're willing to test this out right here. He would then remind Kenjaku that Sukuna has been the only person that's been able to cause Yuji to be even the slightest bit nervous. Aside from Satoru Gojo, of course. Kenjaku would laugh and tell Yuji that he's going to want to re-evaluate his list in the afterlife then. As Yuji would simply smile, Yuji would then simply say to Kenjaku, shall we skip the formalities then? As he would get himself ready. As Kenjaku would say, by all means. Just then, Yuji would notice fingers falling from the sky. He would be confused as they would all begin to glow, blowing up directly in his face. However, Yuji would have been able to guard the attack just in time. He couldn't believe he couldn't notice the presence of another person. That was supposed to be his whole thing. He would then look up as he would see multiple teeth heading his direction, as they would also be glowing. Yuji would then expel a miniature barrier around himself, causing the teeth to drop straight through the ground, causing an explosion to happen on his feet. At the same time, Yuji would use the rubble to bounce up into the air, going to where the falling teeth were coming from. This is where Yuji would then see Hazanoki flying on a creature, shocked beyond belief, because he didn't think Yuji would be able to get up here, as Yuji would tell Hazanoki that he was in his way and that he needs to move. However, from the right of Yuji, a flying cursed spirit would come in, crashing itself directly into Yuji's arm, causing him to be knocked backwards into a building nearby. Yuji would kiss his teeth, realizing that he has to take this battle a lot more serious. Yuji would then activate his technique, causing his entire body to crack, and just as Kenjaku and Hazanoki would take a look towards Yuji, his entire body would then begin to shatter into 1,000 pieces. Kenjaku wasn't buying this though. Kenjaku would place his hands on the ground, summoning a bunch of lower grade cursed spirits, as he would simply take inspiration from Sukuna. The second Kenjaku sees any type of illusions, he will rip them to shreds. There's no point in taking risk on what's real and what's not real with Yuji. However, from behind Kenjaku, he would hear the words, yo. As Kenjaku would turn around, he would then see Gojo, but he knows this has to be an illusion. There's no way. He would then send a whole bunch of low-grade cursed spirits straight towards Gojo. As they would crash into him, Kenjaku would notice, instead of going straight through him, they were stopped right in front of him, like a barrier. Kenjaku would then begin to sweat. There was no way, right? Reaching into his robe, he would realize that the prison realm is gone. He would then curse at himself, as Gojo would close the distance on Kenjaku, telling him that it's been a little while, maybe they should catch up. Kenjaku would then feel a pull. Gojo would have used blue, pulling Kenjaku forward as he would rocket a punch straight towards Kenjaku's gut. This punch would cause Kenjaku to be winded as he would be blown back. He would curse to himself, wondering when the hell did Yuji even take the prison realm? He had no opening to take the prison realm, so how was this even possible? As Gojo would yell out that he shouldn't be distracted in the middle of a fight, sending a red straight towards Kenjaku, sending him flying once more, blowing him back into a building. However, Kenjaku would immediately get up, screaming out that his will not be tarnished by someone like him. He's waited 1,000 years for this. There's no way he was going to idly sit back and let someone like Gojo kill him. Gojo would scream back out that he can try. However, things weren't going to end well for him. Gojo would then shoot out another red, as Kenjaku would use one of his cursed spirits to take the attack. As Kenjaku would spin around the attack, he would begin sprinting straight towards Gojo. He knew that even if he were to use domain amplification, he didn't know if he was going to be able to take out Gojo, or take out his barrier at least. So he was going to try to bait Gojo into attacking him so he could attack back, closing the distance on himself and Gojo. Gojo would throw another punch, as Kenjaku would summon one of his cursed spirits, making the attack strike Gojo in the arm. As Kenjaku would be amazed, the attack actually landed. However, amazement would turn into confusion. The attack actually landed. It would then immediately click inside of Kenjaku's head. This wasn't Satoru Gojo at all. He would laugh to himself, thinking that there was no way his techniques gotten to this level. The illusions were already hard to tell apart from reality. However, to be able to make someone this detailed to where Kenjaku could barely tell, he knows that if Satoru Gojo was here, no matter what attack Kenjaku would have tried to land, it would not have connected like that. Not that easily. So who was he actually fighting? Kenjaku would simply duck down to the ground, summoning a massive wave of cursed spirits. He would then scream out, calling out Yuji, that was pretty smart of him. However, he won't get done in that easily. Everything that he said still stands. He will not let his 1,000-year plan go to waste just like that. His will is absolute, as he would summon more of his flying cursed spirits, sending them in every direction. Taking a page out of Sukuna's book, he would make the curses go haywire, destroying everything in his vicinity, as the entire town would then begin to shatter, as the entire area around them would transform into a forest. Kenjaku would laugh and say that he couldn't believe that Yuji was able to create something of this caliber. He wonders what more Yuji will be able to create. The first thing Kenjaku is going to do is transplant himself into Yuji's body. His technique is something that would allow Kenjaku to do whatever he wanted. However, Yuji would laugh, already being behind Kenjaku, telling Kenjaku that he couldn't possibly fathom what's inside of Yuji's body, as Yuji would send a punch straight towards Kenjaku's torso, as it would connect, causing Kenjaku to be blasted back into a tree. Kenjaku had never fought Yuji head on, however, he couldn't believe Yuji had that much power behind his attacks. However, Kenjaku knew that he needed to gather himself quickly, snapping out of it immediately, summoning a cursed spirit to get him right side up, as Yuji would already be closing the distance. Kenjaku would simply have to use his brain for this battle. The absolute thing he took pride in was his knowledge in sorcery, his knowledge about the world in general. He wasn't going to let some brat show him up. Yuji would close the distance once again, throwing a left this time. However, Kenjaku would grab the attack this time, grabbing it with his right hand. He would pull Yuji closer as he would elbow him in the face, causing Yuji to be dazed just for a little bit. But Kenjaku would follow up the attack, sending 3 quick strikes to Yuji's torso. Yuji would be pushed back slightly. However, he would regain himself, sending a kick straight towards Kenjaku. However, Kenjaku would lift his leg and lower his arm, blocking the attack. Yuji, however, would then use his back foot and twist off of it, sending another kick straight towards Kenjaku's head, connecting with Kenjaku, sending him flying back once more. Kenjaku wouldn't accept it, but he knew he couldn't win like this. Although it was only a light amount of attacks, Kenjaku had already taken heavy damage. He could tell Yuji was doing something to him. Every time Yuji would attack Kenjaku, his body would get heavier and heavier. Although the effect was light at first, every time Yuji was able to land an attack, either if Kenjaku was blocking or not, the weight on his body would still begin to collect itself. Eventually, Kenjaku won't be able to move at all. He needs to finish this fast, and right now, Kenjaku would then do the most sensible thing. He would make hand signs as he would begin to scream out the words domain expansion. However, Yuji would decide not to deploy his domain. Kenjaku, using womb perfusion, would laugh out, telling Yuji that it doesn't matter where he is now. Yuji would then use his curse technique, summoning numerous amounts of illusions that all looked exactly like him, as well as erupting a barrier around himself. He would make his illusions walk in circles around Kenjaku, getting closer and closer, as Kenjaku would notice that his sure-hit effect wasn't working. What could possibly be going on? He would scan each and every last one of the illusions, wondering where Yuji could actually be. This is when Yuji would pop up from behind Kenjaku, attempting to throw a punch. However, Kenjaku would then smile. As the domain would cease, Kenjaku would use his anti-gravity technique, pushing Yuji into the ground. As the illusions before him would begin to shatter, Kenjaku would laugh, smiling, saying that he couldn't believe that he got Yuji with something so simple. He would then rush forward, pulling his leg back, striking Yuji straight in the head, sending him flying into some trees nearby. Kenjaku would then blurt out to Yuji, "Your plan didn't work out the way that you wanted it to, did it?" As Yuji would simply laugh. He would then begin to tell Kenjaku that it's not as if he caught him off guard or anything. It's just, everything is finally complete. Kenjaku, realizing what Yuji was about to do, would begin to use reverse gravity technique on Yuji, slamming him into the ground once more. Kenjaku would then begin to tell Yuji that he can't believe that someone like him believes this feeble dream of his could possibly come true. Dreams of a better world where curses, regular people, and Jujutsu sorcerers could coexist. This isn't some fairy tale that you read in a book. This is reality. You're just something I created to pass the time, to bring back the golden age of Jujutsu. And once I kill you, everything will go smoothly. Yuji would then begin to laugh. He would tell Kenjaku that he couldn't believe him at all. Everything that's been happening has been because Yuji wanted it to happen. From the very beginning, since Yuji first met Tengen, every single thing that he's wanted to happen has happened so far. And this fight between himself and Kenjaku was the final straw, the final bit of cursed energy that he needed to pull together everything down from meeting Kenjaku and showing off a bit of his power, so both Sukuna and Kenjaku can be threatened. He would tell Kenjaku that if he would have just stuck with Sukuna, maybe things would have gone the way that he wanted it to go. The barriers were now full, and it was time for Yuji to become the perfect being. Kenjaku would scream out, however, it would already be too late. Yuji would have made hand signs, making each one of the colony barriers shake, as a giant wave of cursed energy would begin swirling through the air. Kenjaku would then laugh, asking Yuji, did he really think that was all to his plan? Yuji did make the barriers, however, Kenjaku will always be one step ahead. Kenjaku would then summon a few cursed spirits that he had sent out before, as they would bring civilians straight towards him. He would laugh and tell Yuji that people will die if he continues to do this plan. Kenjaku will make sure every single one of the civilians inside of the barriers will die. He will make sure he grinds them into paste and contradict this oh so perfect world that Yuji wants to create, as he would have one of the cursed spirits give him a civilian, as he would hold the civilian by its neck. Squeezing the civilian's neck, he would ask Yuji what was his next plan of operations. If he didn't go along with what Kenjaku told him to do already, he was going to kill this civilian and every last one of them that were out there. Yuji, however, would begin to laugh. He didn't understand Kenjaku. Did Kenjaku really think that a mere civilian would interrupt Yuji's plan to becoming the perfect being? It doesn't matter who dies prior to him becoming the perfect being. All that matters is what happens after. Kenjaku would scream out, calling Yuji a hypocrite. However, Yuji would simply smile and say that all of this is according to his plan, as Yuji would finally let the cursed energy flow straight into his body. As he would begin to undergo a transformation, Kenjaku would look upon Yuji. However, nothing had changed. He still looked exactly as he did, but Yuji could feel it, the ginormous surge of cursed energy flowing throughout his body, merging himself with Tengen, and then having this cursed energy merge with him as well. This was something different. This was perfection. As Yuji would begin to speak, Kenjaku, everything that you have planned, everything that you thought was going to come to fruition, was something that I had already planned myself. You're nothing but a bug that needs to be squashed. I have been waiting for this moment patiently. Everything falls down to this. I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to kill Sukuna. And once everything is done, the world shall be shaped in exactly the perfect image. However, this is only the beginning stage. Kenjaku would then begin to blurt out, telling Yuji that nothing has changed. He's exactly the same. All of his efforts won't be in vain. He's going to kill Yuji here and now. As Kenjaku would put his all into this next attack, he would collect every last bit of cursed energy and cursed spirits that he'd have and morph them together, creating a powerful Uzumaki, telling Yuji that nothing was going to go the way that he wanted it to go. Right now, everything ends, as Yuji would tell Kenjaku that yes, everything is going to end right now. As he would appear next to Kenjaku before Kenjaku had the chance to even think, Yuji would exert his cursed energy, as Kenjaku would be forced straight to the ground. The pressure that his cursed energy was exuding was ridiculous. This was nothing like what Yuji was doing before. Before, it was slightly hard to stand up. However, now, it's completely impossible to stand up at all. Not even that. Kenjaku was being completely crushed by Yuji's cursed energy, as Yuji would simply look upon himself, examining his hands, his entire body. This was only his first stage of perfection. The more he gets used to this cursed energy, the more his body will evolve. And the only way that he could do that is if he continues to fight and use the cursed energy at his disposal. He's going to destroy Kenjaku, kill the cursed spirits that come out of him, and then go straight for Sukuna. However, Kenjaku would scream out that his will would not be disrupted by someone like Yuji, someone that was supposed to be his pawn, someone that was only supposed to be a vessel for Sukuna. There's no way Kenjaku will let someone like him take over everything that he's been preparing for these thousands of years. However, Yuji would simply tell Kenjaku that, no, everything is done. You are done. It's time to give it up, Kenjaku, as he would increase the pressure on his cursed energy, causing Kenjaku's legs and arms to snap out of place. As his body would continue to be crushed, slowly and agonizingly, Kenjaku would slowly meet his fate, as he would die right there on the spot, turned into a pile of goop. As the cursed spirits that were still inside Kenjaku would begin to spew out, as Yuji would simply point his finger, as every single cursed spirit that was spilling out of Kenjaku would be squashed in an instant, as Yuji would simply state that it was time for phase 2 of his plan. Yuji would make sure to find the Jujutsu sorcerers and finally let them in on his plan. None of them could actually stop him now, so they were free to do whatever they wanted. He would find the Jujutsu sorcerers as he would begin to walk up towards them. As Yuta could feel it, this energy was completely different than what he felt before from Yuji. Yuji was already strong in his own right. However, whatever he's done made his strength almost quadruple. Even while suppressing it, Yuta could feel it. The cursed energy was out of this world. No one should ever have this amount of cursed energy in life. Yuji was a completely different being. Yuji would greet Yuta as he would tell him that now that he has obtained perfection and killed Kenjaku, the culling games are officially over. Yuji had only set Kenjaku and himself as the game masters. In doing so, Yuji could end the culling games whenever he wanted, but he needed to fill the barriers in order to gain his perfected form. That was the entire premise of this mess. But now that everything is over, he wants him to find someone named Hana or Angel. They will be the person that will free Gojo Satoru, and once Gojo Satoru is free, Yuji will go straight after Sukuna and kill him. He will meet up with all of his people that he has gathered so far, so they can take care of Sukuna's posse. And Yuta would ask Yuji, is everything actually going to be alright? It is still Sukuna, and who knows how strong he is now. Yuji would tell Yuta that he has no need to worry at all. Even though Sukuna is insanely strong, and he's known to be the king of curses, everything will go according to Yuji's will. The age of Jujutsu sorcery will change, and the world will be perfected. He just needs the Jujutsu sorcerers to trust him. He won't do anything reckless, or think about trying to control the world or anything. He just wants to create a world to where people like his grandfather could live in peace. This was his entire plan, all along. Once Sukuna is dead, that world will be possible. Yuji would tell everyone that he will create a world where everybody can coexist. Humans, cursed spirits, and Jujutsu sorcerers. No one will have to kill anybody. The world will be perfect. There will be no hatred towards humans. There will be no hatred towards cursed spirits. There will be no hatred towards Jujutsu sorcerers. Those who do not abide by these rules shall be punished thoroughly. Yuta would question Yuji, asking if something like this will really even work. He would tell Yuji, if that were the case, then would Gojo not have been able to do that himself while being titled the strongest? Yuji would laugh and simply tell Yuta that even though Gojo was titled the strongest, his mind was incredibly weak, troubled by past connections in the Jujutsu society itself. There was no way someone like Gojo could do something like this. He was so stuck up on being the strongest that he couldn't overlook the simple things. The loneliness that he says that comes with being the strongest isn't something to look down upon. That loneliness is only from those who force themselves into that position. Being strong does not mean you have to take on every burden alone by yourself. If you have the strength to do something, then you should change the world as you see fit. Yuta would then ask Yuji. He knows Yuji slightly told him about what he wanted in this new world. However, what was his real objective? Yuji would then tell Yuta once again, his only objective is to make the perfect world. One where people can coexist with one another. One where people can live their life truly. One where people don't have to worry about if they're going to die to a cursed spirit or if a Jujutsu sorcerer is going to die. One where people can just live normally and nothing odd happens. Once he allows them to free Gojo, he himself will go take on Sukuna And he doesn't want a single person to intervene. There doesn't need to be any needless deaths or anyone else getting hurt. Yuji has already caused enough suffering for everybody else. Everything else that was meant to be done was simply going to be up for Yuji to deal with. It's not him taking on the burden either. It's him simply enacting the plan that he's had in motion since the very first day he enrolled in Jujutsu High School. Yuta would simply sigh and tell Yuji that he wishes him the best of luck. He hopes that Yuji is actually able to create the world that he says he's going to create. He would tell Yuji that he's going to stick to his plan and free Gojo. He will tell Gojo about his plan after he is freed. Yuji would simply nod his head. As Yuta would ask, does Yuji really not need any type of help against Sukuna? However, Yuji would simply tell Yuta that he has his own group and he doesn't need any help from anybody else besides them. He would tell Yuta to make sure he frees Satoru Gojo and that Yuji will finish everything else from now on. Starting now, this was the final stretch. Everything that came after this was do or die. If Yuji were to die, then the world would not become his perfect sanctuary that he wants to create, and the Jujutsu Society will simply stay as it is. Things need to change, and people need to die for the greater good. Yuji would go around, gathering his people, asking them once more if they were ready, finding Yuki, Uro, Higuruma, and Choso, as all of them, seeing how Yuji was now, would agree. If it was Yuji, he has the chance to beat Sukuna, as well as changing this world altogether. On the other hand, Sukuna was ready for Yuji. He had been waiting for Yuji this entire time. He had killed Kashimo and had made quick work of Yorozu. All he was waiting for now was for Yuji to come and face him. He had been playing his technique back in his head numerous times, and he knew eventually Yuji was going to come to face him. He couldn't wait. Yuji was already shown to be promising, someone who was strong in Jujutsu and knew secrets about Jujutsu that other people didn't seem to utilize, even showing Sukuna different ways to use Jujutsu sorcery. Yuji was extraordinary to Sukuna, someone that if even Sukuna defeated, he would remember his name for the rest of his life. And that energy he felt earlier, he knows for a fact that it was Yuji, and that he completed his transformation. The last time he had fought Yuji, he had completely bisected all of his clones and was able to easily tell which one was the real Yuji and which one wasn't. With the help of Arame, he was able to make up for the missing fingers that he had, equaling himself to 20 fingers worth. Sukuna was now at full power, completely waiting for Yuji, as Yuji was still only in the first forms of his transformations. Everything was going according to plan. The Jujutsu sorcerers had unsealed Satoru Gojo and had told him the plan about what Yuji was doing. Gojo would laugh and say that Yuji was always something special. To think he was strong enough to be able to capture me, and on top of that, now he's fixing his mess. What a guy. As the stage would be set, Yuji would ready his people, telling them that they shouldn't interfere between the fight between himself and Sukuna, and that they should only worry about the other one, or anyone else who was in alliance with Sukuna. He would simply tell them to take care of anyone else while he takes care of Sukuna himself. Meeting in the middle of Shinjuku, both Yuji and Sukuna would prepare themselves. This was the final battle. Everything was riding on this. If Sukuna lost, all of his ideals will be squashed, and Yuji will be able to create the perfect world. However, even if Yuji were to lose to Sukuna here, there was still another sorcerer strong enough to take on Sukuna. Meimei would send her crows out to watch the battle between Yuji and Sukuna. As everyone would begin to watch, it would be Yuji's people versus Sukuna's people. Yuji would have Higuruma go after Urarame, seeing as he was the most inexperienced out of all of the people that he had recruited so far, and he would simply have the others on standby just in case something went wrong with Higuruma or wrong with him. The final battle was finally here. Sukuna, at his full power, versus an evolved Yuji. Both parties would take a step forward, with Sukuna grinning at Yuji, telling him that he can't believe a brat like him was able to get this strong. Sukuna would then chuckle, saying that in his years of being a sorcerer, he's never met someone quite like Yuji. At first, Sukuna hated Yuji and wanted to grind him to paste, but now Sukuna can't help but admire Yuji, even if slightly. He's able to do whatever to get the power that he needs, and that's the type of person that Sukuna enjoys. Someone who's willing to throw everything away in pursuit of power. Yuji, however, would simply shake his head, telling Sukuna that no, he isn't simply blindly in pursuit of power. He's nothing like Sukuna. The world will not be run by fear, but it will be ran by someone with authoritative power. Yuji does not want to use his power to control people. He only granted himself this power to make sure people will coexist. Sukuna would then gag, telling Yuji that his fairy tale world is still such a bland idea. He would tell Yuji that he should crush everything underneath his foot and take everything. Only the strongest are able to dictate what happens in this world, and Yuji has the potential to be exactly that. However, he does nothing but lollygag and freelance, doing nothing but nonsense. Yuji would simply laugh, telling Sukuna that his ideals are simply those of the past. The new age that Yuji will make to come into fruition will be the new golden age of Jujutsu. Hearing this, Sukuna would kiss his teeth. Getting upset, he would ask Yuji, does he really believe he can create a new golden age of Jujutsu? However, Yuji would simply smile, saying that, of course he can. However, that was enough talking. I'm only here for one thing, Sukuna, and that is to kill you. Sukuna would then unfold his hands, telling Yuji that he should come try it then. Yuji would smile, saying, with pleasure, as within the first breath after Sukuna said that, Yuji would have already been in front of Sukuna, throwing a punch straight towards Sukuna's chest. Sukuna would smile, catching the attack with one of his hands. However, Yuji would then begin exerting his cursed energy, causing the area around them to be pressurized. However, something Yuji didn't expect was Sukuna was able to counter this using domain amplification. Sukuna would smile at Yuji, telling him that this trick won't work anymore, as Sukuna would use one of his top arms, throwing a backhand straight towards Yuji's face, striking him, causing Yuji to be pushed back. Just then, Sukuna would close the distance, sending an attack of his own. However, Yuji would also send an attack, causing the two fists to clash. Sukuna would then smile, taking a page right out of Yuji's book, creating a small barrier around himself, infused with his own technique. Since he didn't have a cursed energy trait like Yuji, he would imbue the barrier with his technique instead of his cursed energy only. In doing so, it would create small miniature slashes that surrounded Sukuna, causing it to cut Yuji if he were to get anywhere near Sukuna. However, Yuji would simply laugh. He would tell Sukuna that he knows that he came up with that technique, right? Sukuna would only laugh, sending another punch straight towards Yuji. Yuji would parry the attack, getting slightly slashed, while he would tell Sukuna, you know, there is a fatal flaw when imbuing a technique within a barrier like this. That's why I only exert my cursed energy when doing so. Yuji would use domain amplification, striking Sukuna straight in his stomach, breaking the barrier and sending him crashing into a wall. Yuji would then use his curse technique, making another illusion of himself. As both Yujis would rush in, Yuji would begin to explain to Sukuna that enacting a barrier like that was almost like casting a domain. Although the curse technique burnout won't be as severe, there's still a burnout nonetheless. However, Sukuna would smile, pointing his finger out, as a huge slash would be sent straight towards Yuji, catching him off guard for just a second. The illusion of Yuji would be caught by the slash, being shattered on the spot, as Yuji himself would barely dodge the attack, jumping over it, getting one of his legs sliced off. Sukuna would then laugh, rushing forward. He would scream out to Yuji, telling him that he really shouldn't underestimate someone like him, using both of his right arms, sending a punch straight towards Yuji, as it would crash into Yuji's chest, distorting the world around both of them, with Sukuna landing a black flash. However, something was off. Sukuna felt his attack land. He felt the black flash. However, something was still off. This attack would have caused Yuji to crash into a nearby building. However, when Yuji would bring himself out of the rubble, Sukuna would look upon Yuji, and it would seem as if Yuji hadn't taken any damage from that attack at all. Yuji would simply brush the dust off of his clothes. Looking straight towards Sukuna once more, he would tell Sukuna that he doesn't think he understands exactly what's going on right now. Sukuna had the chance to kill Yuji before he was able to evolve, but now that he's been able to evolve, there was absolutely nothing Sukuna could possibly do now to stop him. Yuji would tell Sukuna that he admires him, for he is the king of Jujutsu. If Yuji wasn't here at this moment, and were given the abilities he's given now due to Kenjaku, things might have turned out differently for Sukuna. Yuji would simply tell Sukuna that he needs to consider himself unlucky. It's a shame that Sukuna waited 1,000 years only to die once again. Hearing this would piss Sukuna off. He knows he told Yuji that he admired him slightly. However, that does not give him the justification to talk the way he's talking now. That anger Sukuna felt the first time him and Yuji engaged with one another had never gone away. The words that Sukuna said in that moment, he meant it. He's going to grind Yuji down into nothing but paste, make him a blood stain on the floor, nothing but a forgotten memory. He will thoroughly make sure Yuji regrets underestimating him. Sukuna would scream out the words, "Domain expansion," as Yuji would simply smile. As Sukuna would erupt his domain, Yuji would activate simple domain around himself, telling Sukuna that this was all pointless. He can't stop the inevitable. You have already lost. Sukuna would then scream out to Yuji that the battle wouldn't be over until Yuji was nothing but a paste of blood on the floor, with Yuji asking Sukuna, "Is that so?" If that is the case, then Yuji would make hand signs, saying the words, "Domain expansion, mirror of 1,000 dreams." This would cause the two domains to clash instantly. Although it only looked like Sukuna's was the active domain, Sukuna could feel the clash of domains happening for however long until one of the domains was able to overtake the other. Now it was a battle of attrition. Sukuna would rush in, attempting to gain the upper hand on Yuji, throwing a punch. However, Yuji would duck underneath it, sending a strong right straight towards Sukuna's stomach. However, Sukuna would take the attack, raising his hands in the air and slamming his fist down onto Yuji, with Yuji being able to just barely block it in time. However, Yuji would use this time to drop low, sweeping Sukuna's legs, causing him to trip over. However, Sukuna would instantly catch himself, hopping off his other hand, launching himself straight towards Yuji, as Yuji would deflect the attack, causing both of them to gain quite the amount of distance from one another. Sukuna would rush in once more, as Yuji would exert his cursed energy, causing the pressure around him to increase, making Sukuna's movements just slightly more sluggish. However, Sukuna wasn't going to let up. He would throw in another attack at Yuji, sending a strong left with both of his arms. It would connect with Yuji, however, it wouldn't have as much power as it had before, with Yuji taking the attack and grabbing both of Sukuna's arms. He would then push out as much cursed energy as he could through his fist, causing the pressure around his fist to increase, sending a punch straight towards Sukuna's face. As it would connect, the attack was a lot more devastating than Sukuna thought it was going to be, causing him to be crashed backwards into his own domain, making the domain fall, which in doing so, would allow Yuji to win the domain clash. Sukuna would hurry up and try to use Hollow Wicker Basket. However, Yuji only needed a brief second for the domain's sure hit effect to take effect. However, Sukuna wasn't buying this. He would make a quick deduction that Yuji's domain sure hit had to do something with illusions. He would think to himself and believe that nothing he sees from now on can be guaranteed to be real. If anything, he would slash everything apart. He didn't care. Let it be his own allies. He was going to kill everything in sight if it meant he was able to kill Yuji. However, Yuji would stand before Sukuna and ask him one question. Does all of this really matter to you? You'll die a useless death, and in the end, you will be forgotten. You will die here, Sukuna, and that world that you want to create will not come. Kenjaku's plan has already been foiled. Therefore, you are by yourself and have nothing going for you. You have one person that is willing to stick by your side until the very end, yet you don't even see that person. And at the same time, what would you do even if I were to die? Would you kill everything in sight? Would you take over the Jujutsu world? How exactly would you, being in power, make anything good happen? You will live the same boring life that you once did before, at the very peak of power, living the rest of your life for who knows how long. Is that how you want to live, Sukuna? Sukuna would laugh, telling Yuji to stop with the pleasantries. He doesn't want to be converted. He doesn't want to live some peaceful life. This is what he does as a Jujutsu sorcerer. Everything that he's done up until now has been because he wanted to go that way. If he's killed, it's been because he's wanted to. If he allowed somebody to live, it's been because he wanted that person to live. If he lets something happen, it's because he wanted it to happen. That is what Sukuna means when he says those in power are able to do whatever they want. He would tell Yuji that people fear people like him and Yuji, those with absolute power and the ability to take on the world with barely lifting a finger. Yuji would simply cross his arms and begin to tell Sukuna that he had hoped that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to save someone like him. However, it would seem that it wasn't the case at all. Yuji would sigh, telling Sukuna that it's a shame that he has to kill someone like him. He would then tell Sukuna that maybe in his next life, he will understand the value of life and what exactly he was doing wrong. Sukuna would be confused. Yuji was talking as if the battle was already over. This would piss Sukuna off even more. Sukuna would yell out to Yuji, "What is a brat like him even talking about? You talk as if the battle is already over. You talk as if you are being lenient on me, giving me another chance at life. Why are you looking down on me so much? Do you really believe that you are that much stronger than me? I'll grind you to paste and eat your flesh." However, Yuji would simply laugh, telling Sukuna that no, the battle was already over. The moment Sukuna and Yuji locked eyes with one another, the battle was already over, and there was absolutely nothing Sukuna could do about it. The entire thing was a trap from the get-go. There was not going to be some kind of ultimate battle where Yuji would put his life on the line to kill Sukuna. It was simply Sukuna would show up and Yuji would kill him. He would tell Sukuna that he believes Urame is probably already defeated and that he was giving him one last chance to surrender. However, it doesn't seem as if Sukuna's going to do that. So now, Sukuna will simply die. Sukuna would then realize what Yuji was talking about from the fighting from earlier. From Sukuna landing his black flash, he knew something was off. He just couldn't put his finger on it. And now, everything was connecting. The only thing Sukuna could do was laugh. He couldn't believe it. A brat like this, as the world around him would begin to crack, and then everything would simply shatter. The entire time, from the very beginning, Sukuna was already under Yuji's illusions. The entire battle was nothing but a facade, orchestrated by Yuji to show Sukuna the immense gap in power. The real Yuji this time would step forward in front of Sukuna, exerting his cursed energy, causing Sukuna to fall to one knee, as this pressure was a lot more prominent than the one he had felt earlier. Sukuna would look up at Yuji, telling him that he's nothing but a brat, and one day, this world that he's trying to create will collapse in on itself. Everything that Yuji is trying to create will collapse eventually. May it be by one person or many. Eventually, everything will catch up to Yuji and everything will balance out. Yuji cannot stay in power forever, and he knows that as well. You can't have one without the other in Jujutsu sorcery. That's just how it is. Yuji would then tell Sukuna that that's up for him to figure out, as he would increase the pressure, causing Sukuna to be crushed, causing Sukuna to be simply nothing but a pool of blood on the floor, as everything was finally over. Everything that Yuji had been planning, the entire fight, consuming Tengen, consuming the cursed energy and the barriers, everything was finally done. Now the only part was to move to the final phases of his plan. He's going to dismantle the Jujutsu Society as it is right now and rework it in his own eye, as Yuji's people would walk forward, telling him that everything had been handled prior to before he defeated Sukuna, and the Jujutsu sorcerers would begin making their way towards Yuji. Gojo would be the first to walk forward, asking Yuji, what exactly does he plan on doing now? He's defeated Kenjaku, killed Sukuna. What else is there for him to do? Yuji would tell Gojo that from now on, things will be incredibly simple. He's going to dismantle the Jujutsu Society as it is now. No one will be a weapon, and everyone will live peacefully. He would look Gojo in the eyes and tell him that that burden of being the strongest is no longer his to carry. Although Yuji never saw it as a burden, Gojo would simply smile, telling Yuji that he's trained up a great student, as Yuji would simply say that he was never his student. And I think I'm going to end that here. I know it might not be what you guys expected, but it literally can't be any longer than this. The only reason I say that is because the second Yuji evolves, there was really no one that could match him. That's why I try to like power scale it to where everyone is effectively even until the end of the series, because it just makes it a lot more enjoyable. And by time end of series comes, we already know what their full potential could actually look like, and we know if Aizen wasn't JJK, he'd pretty much have the world under his foot. So, but yeah, I will be trying to do like modular one shots for majority of my what ifs, but not now. I don't know if it'll be anytime soon, but I really do want to do that because I also would like to like try to figure out how the Sumerians would interact with like these Yujis. But yeah, thank you for listening. Sorry for taking so long. And yes, I love you all. Thank you for waiting. Peace.